Hi, my name is Samuel Swihart, and one of my greatest hobbies over the past couple of years has been Dungeons and Dragons. And in getting into this hobby, I have found there is a full subculture dedicated to this game. And it is my pleasure to walk you guys through the cultural phenomenon that is Dungeons and Dragons. But first, what is Dungeons and Dragons? Well, it's a game that consists of a dungeon master or DM that runs the game and a undetermined number of players to act as characters. Characters are a combination of what's referred to as a class, such as a paladin, a fighter, a rogue, a cleric. Any number of combinations along with a race, such as elf, a dwarf, halfling, human, if I've already said that, Goliaths. There's a vast number, and you can play as virtually anything. But where did this game come from that inspired this subculture? And that comes from these two guys, Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. So they created it in 1974, but their first game that they created together was called Chainmail, which later they added fantasy elements, which later on he became Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeons and Dragons Advanced. And Gary Gygax came up with the idea of selling modules or campaigns that acted as a rough script for DMs to run. So these were new settings and adventures, or if there was a current game, then they could try to work these modules in to create a longer narrative. And yes, it's the DM's job to read all of this information and make it work into their game. And if the selling of modules for extra content sounds familiar to at least to some of the PC gamers and console gamers in this class, it became virtually the first DLC. But as far as Dungeons & Dragons as a game in its own, culture is regarded as a fun activity in media. In its first day of representations, hasn't had such a kind look. Because in the late 70s and early 80s, Dungeons & Dragons was portrayed as a gateway to Satan in the news during the Satanic Panic.
D&D, and it's become popular with children anywhere from grammar school on up. Not so with a lot of adults who think it's been connected to a number of suicides and murders. The idea of the game, which is played by highly imaginative and intelligent kids, is to assume the role of one of the characters. One game can go on for weeks or even months. The problem seems to be that some kids take it more seriously than others, take it a step further, playing a character who brings them the power in a game they couldn't possibly get in real life.
But Dungeons & Dragons persisted, despite being maligned in the news. And it became synonymous with nerd and geek culture in characters such as Moss from the IT Club, Dipper from Gravity Falls, and the Big Bang Theory cast as well. But the biggest resurgence in Dungeons & Dragons in media and just in the game in general is a big thanks to the Twitch streaming show Critical Role. Critical Role is a group of voice actors coming together and playing Dungeons and Dragons as different characters throughout long, long stories and campaigns. And you can listen to it all on Spotify, iTunes, etc. And these guys have nearly 700,000 weekly viewers on Twitch, which isn't breaking a lot of traditional TV views out of the water by any means, but that's still a large amount of people coming together to watch these guys play such a valued game. And lastly, we come to it today where we have platforms such as Roll20, where people can play with strangers from around the world online playing Dungeons and Dragons together. And there's also been live play podcasts that have done Dungeons and Dragons content, such as The Adventure Zone, Not Another D&D Podcast, and Dungeons Daddies, just to name a few. But the subculture has, of course, grown much larger over time. It's been an inclusive environment for beginners and those curious regardless of who you are. Friendships have been born from playing this game online and through game stores through the Adventures League. And online forums such as Reddit and Tumblr have full subgroups to discuss, plan, and coordinate adventures together, as well as bring ideas to the table for new spells, magic items, even monsters, which has gotten the lovingly name of homebrew. So what I really want you guys to take away from this is that even though your hobby and what you're into may have been, even if it's dragged through the mud, mocked, made fun of, comedically, for comedic value, or to show that this person is an outcast. Just know that as long as you're having harmless fun with your friends, doing something that you love, or even doing something that's just for you, just enjoy it, because that's all part of the human experience. Thank you.